everyone. I'm John Evans. Welcome to another episode of One on One. Trot Nixon made it to the very top in his profession, winning a World Series as a starting outfielder for the Boston Red Sox in 2004. Success for Trot, though, did not come immediately as a pro baseball player. It took him a while to make it to the major leagues, but once he did, he stayed there, playing parts of 11 seasons at the highest level. Now, almost 10 years out of baseball, Trot spends most of his time watching his two boys play the same sports that he used to play. For the next hour, Trot's going to share the stories of his career and how he worked his way from Wilmington to the World Series.
My favorite place playing was in Pawtucket, and I think just Ben Mondor was our team owner in Pawtucket for years. He's passed away now, and he was by far the best owner that I've had. And not taking a swipe at any other major league owners, because that's just a different animal when you're at the major league level. It's a business, it's corporate. There's millions of dollars invested. And our owners, Johnny Henry, they were great.
Oh yeah.
But they had other things on their plate too. But Ben Mondor, he was all about the city of Pawtucket, the Red Sox, his ball club, and he made it personal with his players, which is a lot easier to do at the minor league level than it is at the big league level. So, just being around him and him coming in, and at the end of every year, teams have a team party. They'll go out to eat. We'll get a certain restaurant, and we'll kind of either close the restaurant down, or they'll take half of it, close it down for us, and we'll just have a great meal on our last road trip. And it was always unique watching him come in there and go, "Hey, how much money have you raised in Kangaroo Court?" And some of the dumb things that players do during the course of the year, you may get fined for it. And we're like, "Oh, we got $250." He goes, "Where are you going to eat on $250 with 23 guys?" So he'd start throwing $1,000 packs out at guys, and he would pay for our meal and so forth. So the players loved him, and I think the uniqueness of Pawtucket, where the fans would take these any type of kit that they can put baseball cards and a pen in and drop them down like they were fishing almost, fishing for autographs. I think those were some unique things. And there's probably boatloads of stories, but that's campfire stuff. You sit around there.
Do you value those memories now more almost 10 years after being in the game?
I think, I don't talk about them a lot. Maybe my boys will ask a little bit about it, but not much. You usually relive those when you're around some of those guys that you played in the minor leagues with. I don't get to see many of them. Maybe some of the guys in the big leagues. One guy I do get to see every year that I played against in the minor leagues and played with in the big leagues, Brian Dahlback. And, he and I probably have the closest friendship because he's the only one I see every year at fantasy camp. Yeah. And we'll relive some of those days, but most of our time, with each other, we were at the big league level. So a lot different, when you're at the major league level and at the minor league level, a little different places to eat.
Sure.
Too,
Oh yeah. I can imagine. When was the first time that you learned baseball was a business? Because I imagine when you're at high school and post 10 and stuff like that, you're still playing with friends that you grew up with. Was there a first time that you realized, now you're getting paid to play, that this is a business? I'm in a different league now.
Probably the major league level.
Really? Even minor leagues?
Yeah, minor leagues, I was fortunate. I was drafted so high. I know there's probably a lot of other guys that were not drafted that high, so they – ownership or minor league leadership probably didn't have that much of a tolerance, for if a guy was struggling, if he was young, he was struggling a little bit, they may go ahead and get rid of him because they don't have a lot invested in him. And I knew they had a lot invested in me, and I had a lot invested in myself. I had, things that I wanted to achieve, but I had to go about, kind of learning a lot about myself and how to accept the good, with the bad, or more or less accept the bad with the good. You got to have success failing, so you can move on from that failure to being the kind of ball player you wanted. But major league level, you kind of learn that real quick. I don't want to sound too harsh, but at professional level, it's you're a player, you're a piece of meat.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, and that might be too harsh because I know there's a lot of great owners out there, and but it's a business, and the one thing that you realize is sometimes as a player you might think you have a great relationship with a general manager, coaching staff, and coaching staff is kind of aside from that, but maybe the front office people. Then all of a sudden, you might get traded, or you don't re-sign, or maybe you had an extension on your contract that was taken away from you because you got hurt. Those kind of things sting, and then you realize, okay, this is a business, and I've got to look out for myself,
right,
more than anything. So
and I interviewed Connor Barth for one of the podcasts a couple of months ago, and he was telling me that there were times that he thought he had that good relationship, and the next thing hand in your playbook, or
exactly.
you're cut, or they're drafting a guy and didn't even tell me they were drafting a guy to take my job. I imagine those are the times you realize this is down and dirty. You got to look out for yourself.
Yeah, and I think I saw it even more obvious when I had moved on from the Red Sox. I went to the Indians. I had a great time there. We were so close of possibly playing in the World Series, and I think we would have won with the kind of team we had, but I was never really healthy there.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I helped the team quite a bit leadership wise, but I never really felt like I contributed like I anticipated to on the field. But I was seriously recovering from my back surgery that had kind of laid me up. And then after that, there was just nowhere to go. I didn't, it wasn't just the business. Maybe a little bit of it was. And then going to the Diamondbacks, I kind of resurrected things. I accepted where I was going to the minor leagues. I accepted it, and I made the best out of it, kind of helping the young kids, as they mature and get older in the game of baseball, but also trying to get back to the major league level. And I really wanted to be a part of the Diamondbacks. They had a good young core, some veteran guys up at the big league level, and you kind of start to understand a little bit that it's a business, because I'm like, you look at your numbers, you're doing real well. You're, league leaders, you're the tops on the team, on a team that's kind of struggling. There's some opportunities up there, but there are no roster spots. And you're like, well, there's 40 roster spots out there throughout our minor league organization. You mean tell me that I can't get on one of them?
Yeah.
But it's just the business. It's the nature of the beast. And a lot of stuff, it's hard to understand. And my suggestion to ball players is like, you got to do what's in your best interest, and that means invest what you can into yourself. And you can't worry about a lot of things that you have no control over.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have no control over what the GM wants to do with you, except you give him the feedback that he needs to make that decision. By going out and taking care of your body and playing the game the way it needs to be played. And
take me back. I've been here 25 years now, which is hard to believe for me. But I remember I came in 1992, and you and the post-10 crew at that point in time were just a machine going through people. Practice field, after school, New Hanover, doing the books and everything else like that. Was there a time, or were you standing out at right field or taking snaps on the practice field as a quarterback, that you saw yourself in right field for the Boston Red Sox? You saw yourself batting number 3. You saw yourself leading off in the major leagues. Were you that kind of a dreamer back then?
No, I mean, I knew that my dream was to play professional baseball. I wanted also to have the opportunity to play collegiate football. Never really ever crossed my mind. I didn't really care about being a professional football player. It's just something that football kind of grew on me, because early on in my years in Pop Warner, I enjoyed football, but it wasn't very fun. There was some times where you had to kind of like mature in the game to really enjoy it. And once I got to high school, then I really started to love the game of football, not just so much playing quarterback, but also contact as well. But baseball was something that I always loved, and
Even more than football.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I mean, I grew up like, well, not like a lot of kids nowadays, but I played football, I played basketball, I played baseball, and played soccer too. Where you can play all of those sports and none of them overlap the other. Now you can't do that pretty much, but baseball was definitely my first love, and it was something that I always dreamed about doing. I remember watching, as corny as it may sound, the Field of Dreams, and I was like, I want to play professional baseball.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of coaches coming up in little league, middle school, high school that invested a lot of time into me.
And your dad was a ball player, wasn't he? I mean,
yeah, he grew up. He grew up. He played baseball and football. I probably played basketball too. He grew up around Catfish Hunter.
Yeah, and that was a big influence on you early too, right?
Yeah, Catfish. Being able to see a big league player, that was always exciting for me. It was an old timers game when we got to see them. Perquimans County. Mm-hmm. The high school would play the old timers. It was Catfish and his brother and my dad and his brothers, and there were some good ball players out there on both sides, and it was always fun to watch Mr. Jimmy Catfish Hunter pitch against his son, and that was always. And he'd go up there, he was dropping his curveball, throwing his fastball, pinpoint control, and then being able to go to his house for kind of like the post game party, because it was a big pig picking, by the way. I mean, the high school raised a lot of money. They cook I don't know how many hogs out there, and it was tremendous sight just to see it. It was out actually, if I looked out of my mother's house, there you can just see cookers all over the place. But
so the dream kind of started all the way.
Yeah, I got to see the World Series trophies, and I'm just like, man, that's like hallowed ground. I was like, I want to touch it, but I'm not going anywhere near it. And he kind of showed me he didn't work with me a lot, but kind of showed my dad and I, how to hold the curveball, and how he wanted to roll out of the hand and so forth. When I was younger, right before I started throwing the curveball and so forth. So in little league, but that's just kind of where it started, and it kept growing year after year, and not only my teammates, but coaches played a big part in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously in high school, Coach Miller in football, Coach Sasser, Dave Boston. Just on and on. I'm leaving a lot of them off right now, and then obviously Brewster and Bill Rhodes and Andy. That he's actually coaching the girls softball. He's coaching his daughter out here, and at New Hanover. But they were a huge part of my life. But the biggest one was my dad. We banged heads quite a bit, but we worked a lot too. I was fortunate that he built a batting cage in the backyard. We hit a lot back there. We would go over to the rival Hoggard High School and hit on their field on Sundays and so forth. We'd throw passes, what used to be where the girls' softball fields are. It used to be kind of a track and field area where my sister and brother, they went to high school there. So we would go throw football there, and then I'd have to run back to the house. Or
run off the field before somebody from Hoggard.
Well, yeah, run off the field, but then I also had to run back to the house. That was my conditioning. So, so he spent a lot of time, and also he was a doctor as well. So he spent a lot of time, at the hospital, doing his thing, but and then also out there in the cage. And obviously my mom, I can't forget my mom. She's the one that took me everywhere if Dad couldn't get me there, and she consoled me when it needed to be consoled, because my dad and I, we banged heads quite a bit, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
Was there a first time that you remember that a scout may have said something to you, or somebody you were told, hey, there's a scout in the stands watching you play? Because you don't become the number 7 pick without people knowing about you long before your senior season.
Well, the funny part, when my first year at New Hanover, here I am, a ninth grader, freshman, and the first game of the year is against East Carteret, which had Brian
Taylor. Yeah.
And Brian Taylor, when we turned the machine on, like 95, I mean, we hadn't even gotten up to 98 where he was being clocked. I was like, we're getting ready to face this. You know, I don't know how old I was. I wasn't that old, but, well, actually, I think I was about 15, 16, seeing about 98 miles an hour. You know, it was quite a difference. And then the funny part was, you know, I can't remember who led off for us that year in ninth grade, but then you see about 40 guns go up in the air, you know, at the game. So that was the first time I've ever seen scouts at a game. And just about every time we played Brian that year, whether it was in high school or even in Legion ball, you know, you saw a lot of scouts. But for me, looking back, I don't really know. Maybe some college scouts. You know, I was fortunate. I got invited to try out for the National Junior Olympic team.
Yeah.
That was at the end of my junior year, I believe. And I went out there and participated. I mean, I played against, you know, some of the top baseball players in the country, and
Sure.
later, you know, Preston Wilson drafted in first round, Alex Rodriguez, AJ Hinch,
guys that played with you.
Yeah,
in the majors,
and played several years at the major league level, and I played against them as well in the major league level. And it was a great event, and we were probably the weakest team. I think we were the East. We were probably the weakest team out of all of them, because the West and the South were completely loaded with ball players. I mean, it was amazing. But we won it. We won the gold medal. And through that process, I had a great week. Got to spend some time with the Clemson coaches, just, you know, in the recruiting process and so forth. Coach Leggett was there. And
so you get introduced to that.
Yeah,
that
it's
whole
just
thing
that
there?
kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until after that I declined to go on. I made the Junior Olympic team, but I declined because I had responsibilities football-wise. And so I came back for football. But that's kind of when professional scouts, you know, you saw some here and there. Maybe you would hear about there's a Detroit Tiger scout out at football practice, you know, maybe to see if, you know, what's going on out of football, or how serious I would be at football, how serious football was in my life. And pretty much not till that senior year do you start seeing professional scouts at practice, at ball games, and so forth.
Take us. I mean, at the time, I imagine, you know, you got the offer. You know, all the lauds come in. You know, Baseball America player, everything. You get the offer to go to NC State. Was there a time after you're drafted, negotiations? Were you ever close to going to NC State? Did the negotiations go well with the Red Sox? Can you take us through that whole period for me?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little crazy, because I think, you know, and my standpoint was, you know, maybe I really didn't have one, because I really wanted to play football and baseball at NC State, you know, and then I really wanted to play professional baseball. What didn't help, Coach Sheridan retired unexpectedly in the summer. And actually, I heard he lives in Myrtle Beach, so I got to track him down and find out exactly why he retired. And what it did, it just kind of set off a chain reaction that Coach O'Kane became the head coach. And he was the one that, you know, I spent a lot of time with, talking with. He was offensive coordinator, worked strictly with the quarterbacks. And when that happened, that relationship that he had with the quarterbacks was gone.
Right.
Yeah, he had a team to worry about. I understand that. But that's why I wanted to go to NC State. So I look nowadays, when kids, you know, somebody gets let go, you know what, I think kids should have the opportunity to move on, because they've built relationships with this guy. Maybe families built relationship with a certain coach here and there, and now he's gone. Mm-hmm. So I understand. I can, you know, I didn't leave. I was committed to NC State. But, you know, that didn't help starting off. I think, you know, the uncertainty about what was going on, it happened so fast. Everybody, you know, heads were probably spinning in NC State football, trying to get the program to continue on the same path it was. Plus, you know, for me personally, you know, in their eyes, I think they like, well, we don't know whether or not this kid's going to be here or not. Mm-hmm. You know, they were afraid to ask. I know Preston Pogue was an assistant coach at that time. He had played baseball and played. I think he may have played professional baseball as well, or professional football. I knew he was around. So, and my dad kind of kept things. You know, he would keep me abreast of how the negotiations were going, but really didn't bother me that much because you know I was up in Raleigh and doing the football thing. Wanted to concentrate on that. So. And, you know, I think scouts would show up to see if I was serious about the football, see if I was at practice, you know, at times. So it was kind of a whirlwind. But, you know, maybe I wasn't smart enough to try to look at everything.
But at the time you're 18 years old.
Yeah, I'm 18 years old. I'm smart enough just to say, okay, I'm going to walk forward right here and worry about getting to breakfast time and then getting there, getting dressed, getting out on the field, understanding what I need to do. Didn't do a very good job with, you know, I could run the option. And, but as far as like the reading, I wasn't really taught too much on some of the advances. Our coach that was in there, he wasn't a quarterback coach. He kind of got thrusted in that position. He was a tight ends coach. So, I was
a lot going on there.
Yeah, I was learning from Terry Harvey and Jeff Bender, who are great, you know, assets for me. I love those guys. They were great to me, but it just got to the point where I would just chuck the ball way downfield, and the receivers loved it. Like, this guy's going deep, and I'm just like, all right, I'm going to you right now. I'm just going to fire this thing.
Ready, run underneath.
I'm either going to overthrow you or we're going to score a touchdown maybe. Either way. Funny. But
so you end up going with the Sox.
Yeah. That was actually a day before classes started.
Yeah, I mean, it went on for a while.
Yeah, it went on, and I found out that some coaches were like, you know, had little inside bets going on like whether I was going to stay at state. Never 1 minute did they ever say anything to me about it.
Right.
But it came from, you know, some of the guys who equipment managers, and I said, really? And they go, yeah. I said, well, go in there and put your money, $50 down. He goes, I'm leaving right now, and it kind of upset me a little bit, but not so much that it changed my mind. It just affirmed that, you know, every day got closer and closer. I'm like, I really want to play baseball. And it was a culmination of a lot of things. But I love NC State to death. And, you know, my wife, it's where I met my wife years ago before I took off to play professional baseball. But, you know, and I left that night before, drove back home, and I can't remember. It may have been Gene Motley who had called me and says, well, you're not up at camp. We had Red White Day is what it was, and I wasn't at the scrimmage. And I went out and said goodbye to a few of the coaches and the players, and I left. And they were, why weren't you up there? And I was like, well, I'm going to sign to play professional baseball.
Yeah.
So.
Now, it took you a while to get to the major leagues. Was there ever any time at any point in time, even when it was with an injury or a bad week or whatever, was there any time when you said, I don't know if it's, or were you always driven to make it to the major leagues?
I was driven. You know, I was driven. I felt like I knew that my abilities, I could play at the major league level. It was just going to probably take some time. You know, some guys get up there a lot quicker than others. I did my first year, kind of ran into some back problems that kind of, you know, escalated years down the road. And eventually, you know, I had to have surgery on my back. And, but never once did I ever say, well, I don't know. I never doubted myself, put it that way. And, but there were some things that I needed to understand about myself and accept about myself so that, you know, I could, a lot of it was failure, you know, because in high school, I didn't never fail. You know, I hit, you know, you hit 500 or 600 or whatever, and that's not failing. You know, when you're 1 for 15 or 1 for 20 in 3 series, that's failing, you know? So how do you handle that? I wasn't very good at handling that. I was, you know, 18, 19 years old still, and not an excuse, but I just wasn't very good at that. And it took me some time. And then the injury came in, kind of slowed me down a little bit. I just, I think at times I felt like, you know, is something going to happen to my back? So that kind of carries over as you're playing.
Gun shy a little bit.
Yeah, and then it wasn't, then my first year in AAA, I really struggled early on. But the second half had a really good second half, and basically that I think it was my fifth year, my second year in Pawtucket is where I just said to myself, you know what, God gave me an ability to play baseball, gives all these guys the ability to play baseball. So why don't I take my mind out of everything and just take that ability and go with it, because I don't have many more opportunities. I knew by last year I don't have many more opportunities to make it with the Red Sox before I probably got traded.
Yeah.
And I went out and had my best, professional year. That got me an opportunity to get called up and stay from there.
Your very first time, I imagine you went to Fenway at some point in time, but the first time you actually stepped foot on that field, your thoughts?
I was really nervous. Actually, I'm trying to think. The first field that I ever set foot on to play was in Yankee Stadium. It was late in the game. I was my first year in Double-A. It was a part of my contract. Honestly, I really didn't want to be there because I was like, I didn't deserve to be here. But they're like, we want you to be up there. You're not playing hardly at all, so you're just a part of it. But then all of a sudden he tells me to go in and run at first base. Now, this is, I believe, the top of the eighth. And I haven't moved from the bench. I haven't even stretched because I've never had to stretch the whole time. So I'm right here. I'm actually leaving just to go to the restroom because I had to use the bathroom bad. And because I'm drinking nothing but water and Gatorade the whole day. So I had to use the bathroom. And he says, try to get your helmet. You're going out to first. I'm like, oh what? Okay. All right. Boom. And I run out there. And I'm just like, I got to use the bathroom so bad. And here I am. I've got a pinch run right now. I don't even know what the signals are of the steel signals. So that was the first time I set foot was in Yankee Stadium. And
who was first baseman? Chambliss?
No, it was Tino.
Okay.
That was when the Yankees were really good.
Conversation at that level?
No, not really. I didn't want to talk to anybody because I had to use the bathroom. That's all I cared about. I was like, if he hits the ball in the gap, I may pee on myself because I'm going to be scoring. That's the way I felt. But then,
oh, that's funny.
Yeah, a couple weeks later. What was awesome too. I was in Detroit. Roger struck out 20. And I'm sitting over there, and I'm just kind of like, the dugouts in the old Detroit Stadium were awful. If you were above 6 feet, which I wasn't, I was 6'1", but if you're like 6'2", 6'3", it would hit your head all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm just walking around, talking to some guys, and going, man, Roger's got a lot of strikeouts today. And one of the trainers said, shut up, don't say anything, rookie. And I'm like, all right, okay. I don't know what the big deal was. Yeah. Then the end of the game comes. Everybody's like going out, going nuts. And I'm just like jumping. Like, what happened? We won. I know, but did we clinch something?
Yeah.
They're like, Roger struck out 20. And I was like, I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew he had a lot of strikeouts, but got to witness that. And then got to play in my first game at Fenway. We were out of the playoffs. And Mike Greenwell, we were in Detroit the getaway day after Clemens 20 strikeouts. Mike Greenwell, who's a veteran guy, salty guy, I liked him. I always respected him. He turned at me. He says, hey, Trot, you ready to play? I was like, what, today? And he starts laughing. He goes, no, when we go back home. I was like, sure, I'm ready to play whenever, but I'm not going to play.
Right.
He says, all right, just be ready. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And so we get back home. It was the last game of the season. It would have been Mike Greenwell's last game as a Red Sox. And he had a fantastic career.
Yeah, he did.
And he goes, hey, Trot, you ready to play today? I'm like, yeah, but why aren't you playing? And he says, I want you to play.
Wow.
And because I don't think he wanted to play either. I think that was the biggest thing. And he came over and said that to me. And actually, he said that the night before. Mm-hmm. So, of course, I didn't sleep all night. We're playing the Yankees, too, the boot. Yeah. And, what an experience. Girardi is the catcher, and I'm up there. He's a chatterbox.
Oh, really?
And I was sitting there right here. I'm getting ready, facing Ricky Bonas, and I dropped my bat in the batter's box.
Oh, no.
And Girardi turned around and looks at the umpire going, oh, my God, did you see this kid? He's nervous as I don't know what. But then 2 pitches later, I got my first hit.
Yeah.
I got over to third base, and Wade Boggs is sitting there talking to me. He goes, "Welcome to the big leagues." And I was like, I was just mesmerized at everything. This is a dream come true. And
Sure.
And the greatest part was Mom and Dad were there. Catherine was there, my wife. My high school Coach Brewster and Coach Miller were both there. So they got to see all that. A lot of, the people that invested a lot into my career. So
all those years, I mean, I could go through all of it, but what was your best year? Was your best year, do you look at it statistics-wise? Do you look at it how you played? Do you look at leadership? Do you look at all that into a best year? Which one was it?
I think, obviously, anybody is going to say, when I look at my best year or look at their best year, it's going to be statistic-wise. 2000, I believe it was 2003 was my best statistical year.
306, 28 home runs.
Overall,
I just didn't know if you felt you played better for any other reason other than that year.
No, I mean, that was the best year. And really in that year, I didn't get to play every day. I platooned in the outfield too. I had, I think the year before, my batting average was really low, but it was the most RBIs I'd had. I think I had 94. And then you reflect back on the whole year, like, man, I gave up at least 10 RBIs. I know I should have gotten, so I could have been over the 100 mark there. But there was another year that I did something. I can't remember what it was. Maybe had the 1 year, 2001. It's kind of obviously it was a crazy year for a lot of people. I had, my wife and I had our first son, and Jimmy Williams, who was a very instrumental manager in my life, he didn't give up on me. He worked with me. People don't realize how many hours he worked with me in the cage, just hitting.
Because that was his specialty. He was a hitting instructor going through most before he got a manager's job.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and third base coach as well. And he spent a lot of time with me, and to the point where I think the organization, my very first year, wanted to trade me. And Jimmy's like, no. He goes, I'm going to get him right. And he did, and I spent a lot of hours hitting. My buddy Brian Dahlback that I talked about a little bit earlier, he and I hit with Jimmy, and he had just been fired, so it was kind of some turmoil. I had a couple of teammates that were kind of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and but I had a great year that year. 9/11 happened, so it was a difficult time with that, but also my son was born on that day too, so it was.
Wow, really? I didn't realize that was his birthday.
Yeah, 9/11, and and then the venture of trying to get up there. Finishing out the season, being able to play that year was probably the most memorable.
Right.
Cal Ripken's last 4 games, we were the team they were playing against. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And you were out in
experience.
right field. So
I was playing center field then.
Oh, okay.
We had so many injuries and so forth.
So you're watching all this unfold.
Watching unfold. President Clinton came to the game, and I'm sitting there looking at, there's 15 snipers up on the roof. I'm just looking at all of them during the game going dude, you see the snipers everywhere all over here? And,
But 04, obviously, with the World Series and bringing that back, to those of us who watch professional sports from a long way away, can you explain just what it means, the hard work to be a champion on top of everything it meant to Boston that year?
Well, I mean, obviously, professional athletes, they train to be at their best for every single game. So from a baseball standpoint, you want to be your best for 162 plus games. Football, it's 16 plus games. Basketball, over 82 games, to be your absolute best, so that you could do your part on your team to hopefully, hoist that trophy at the end of the year. Now, can I explain what it means to Red Sox fans? No, it takes too long. We don't have enough podcast time. I mean, Red Sox Nation, it is a way of life. People that are in this area that will listen to the podcast, that are been Red Sox fans, that are from the Northeast, Massachusetts, whatever, they understand what I'm talking about. It is a different way of life because we don't have a professional team here in Wilmington. We don't have one in North Carolina baseball-wise. I mean, we got minor league teams, but minor league teams, they switch every other year, it seems like. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, Red Sox baseball, more than any other sport, in my opinion, up there in the Boston area, is like spoon-fed from birth.
Yeah.
It's in the baby bottles. It's, in the formula. It's in everything. It's in your Starbucks or your Dunkin' Donuts.
Right.
Dunkin' Donuts probably
Sure.
get mad for saying Starbucks, but it's in that. As soon as a child can visually see and react to certain things, they put the roster out there in front. Like, this is what he looks like. This is what he looks like. And it's amazing too, because you walk down the street and you could have your hat and glasses down just like this and just kind of walking, and they'll be like, "Hey, what's up, so-and-so Trot?" I was like, "Man, how do you do that?" I was like, "Should I just walk around with no hat on? Because you don't see me that way."
It amazed you the first time it happened to you up there?
The first time it happened, and then, when I went back last year, you're walking around, and I'm like, I'm 40 plus years old right now, and, this and that, and people still, remember you, can recognize you. And that's when I knew I was spoiled as a professional athlete. I got a lot of other buddies that played in other organizations, and I guarantee you they could not say that. That how much now, obviously winning a World Series helps too as well, but just the way I tried to go and play the game, I didn't get to play it for as long as I wanted to, but the way I tried to play the game for the fans in Boston, maybe it kind of it suited them, it fit into their persona. But winning that championship, I always told Brian Delback, we would joke about it, like, what kind of parade would it be? I was like, well, we'd have to get in the duck boats to go on the water because there'd be so many people. Well, we just made jokes about it, but then all of a sudden when it happened, we realized we're going into the water. Are we supposed to be going in the water today? I didn't think the parade. He goes, there's so many people on the Charles River that we have to take the boats into the Charles River because there's that many people that were lined up. I remember seeing an old man on a rock on the water, just, and how many years how many years has he been around and he hadn't been able to see a world championship? Same thing that the Chicago fans just went through.
Oh, yeah.
And I can reflect on that. Obviously it was a lot longer, but I still think our fan base tops the Cubs fan base by far. And
you played. Go ahead.
You see it with the Cubs too. They travel real well, just like the Red Sox. We can go out to Anaheim, and all of a sudden there's, 15,000 Red Sox fans there, and the Anaheim Angels guys or the LA Angels guys are like, where are these fans coming from? Like, dude, they're just everywhere, and it's probably a cheaper ticket to fly to California, get tickets there, go to the game than it is to try to get into Boston, into Fenway with parking at $100.
You said an interesting word you said earlier was spoiled.
Yeah.
As a major leaguer. Is there a huge crevice between life as a major league player, how you're treated, versus even life as a minor leaguer?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you have to understand, too, Pawtucket is Red Sox Nation.
Right, yeah.
And so it's a pretty big thing in Pawtucket. Now, Pawtucket's a small little area, small little town, so a lot of guys will live maybe in Providence or maybe a little bit further north of it. So you're not interacting a lot with the fans in Pawtucket, but the fans that come to Pawtucket, are coming from all over, and they might be coming from even from almost Boston because it's the easier ticket to get. It's a little bit cheaper. Maybe they don't have season tickets at Fenway. They'll come down and see the next in line for the major league level. So yes, in Pawtucket we're spoiled too, and I think a lot of guys who played a year. It's kind of hard in 1 year, but if you played multiple years in Pawtucket, you realize, how valuable it is to be able to play in that organization and how much you mean to the fan base there. But definitely when you get to the major league level and you're able to spend, you got to be able to spend some time in an organization. It's hard to do that with just 1 year.
Sure.
But even when you come in, some guys come in a trade. They're like, this place is unbelievable. Like, what are you talking about? He goes, it's unbelievable here. These fans are nuts for Red Sox baseball. And, these are guys who are coming from organizations that literally had 30, 40,000 a night. Mike Lanson was one of them coming from the Colorado Rockies, and they were winning there, but he got traded to us. And And he says, this is unbelievable around here. He goes, our fans love baseball out there, and they're crazy, but this is a different kind of crazy.
2 years later, '06 season ends, and all of a sudden now you're a free agent.
Yeah.
Did that hurt any personally, or is it, again, just a business? You've got to go out and try to find the best for Trot Nixon?
I think that's when you learn it's a business. Because, part of it hurt because of the kind of the things that had happened towards the end of the season, contractually wise, and then my body, and being hurt. So there's some things that kind of stung, upset me a little bit towards the end of the year, but it was time to move on because I realized too that I've got to make sure my body is in the position it needs to be to get a job. Mm-hmm. And one of the most frustrating, sometimes for professional athletes, it's exciting, being able to go on the free agent market, most of the time, because sometimes you go on the free agent market and you realize nobody wants you. So
what was it like for you?
Well, it was really difficult because one day I woke up and all of a sudden it felt like my leg was, if I had like a pouch over my leg and somebody was pouring hot cement in there. And I knew it was a problem. And so I called the doctor that I had rehabbed my back with down in Miami, and he, Dr. Barth Green, is a renowned neurosurgeon down there, and he said, okay, I want you to go outside and I want you to do this and do that. And he goes, well, how is it? I go, I can't do it. I go, what's going on right now? He goes, you're going to have to, fly down here. I have to go get pictures taken. And I'd had a herniated disc, and the disc was pushing against the nerve, and it was just shutting everything down in my right leg.
Yeah.
Excuse me, my left leg. And so that was scary. That was upsetting because I was like, I literally couldn't do anything. I couldn't walk at all without I can walk with a limp. So no pain, but just everything that I've done in my entire life athletically, you never thought about this, and now all of a sudden it's here now. So that kind of squashed my my free agency real quick. I got it repaired, and two teams wanted me. That was it: the Oakland A's and the Cleveland Indians. And it was difficult because my buddy, who's now the pitching coach for the Oakland A's, I always wanted to play for Billy Beane and wear white shoes in the game with Oakland A's. Yeah. And I always kid him. I always tell him, I say, hey, when you go see Billy, tell Billy I'm still waiting for my white shoes. And but Cleveland, I felt like, was the best bet for me where it was. It's a long way away going out to California and taking the family there. And Cleveland's medical staff was top notch. I think that was the biggest thing. And I knew a little bit about their training staff because in the past years, the Indians were a team that the guys were strong. You're like, hey, well, we had to do this, we had to do that. It's mandatory. And so I said, you know what? I said, this is probably the staff that I need the most for my body. And it was. And it took a while to recover from that. So a long story short, that free agent, it started off a little sour towards the Red Sox because I really wanted to, be there for a couple more years. I wasn't looking for some extension for 5 years or whatever.
Did you want to play your whole career there?
I would have loved to. Yeah. I would have loved to, but I think as you go along in professional baseball at the highest level, you start to realize that that's probably not going to be the case. Yeah. And but I felt like we had some opportunities for maybe an extensions of a year or two, and it was taken away because I got hurt. Yeah. Something unexpected. So I was a little unhappy with that, but I was looking forward to the free agent opportunity, and made it a little bit more difficult when you had to have back surgery. Yeah. But I was very thankful for the Indians to give me that opportunity and get me healthy again, because I wasn't really healthy until the middle of August.
Take me to the point where you said, all right, it's time to stop. And how difficult was, because I'm not looking for the day that I walk out of here and never allowed back into a television station again. Yeah. I don't know what I'm going to do that day. What was the turning point, and when was that point that Trot Nixon said, all right, it's time for me to take that next step?
Well, obviously I was with the Brewers in spring training. I wasn't having a great spring training. I was a veteran and some young guys around, Ryan Braun, Prince Fielder, some of these guys, great guys. Love being around them. I knew what I was capable of, but I never thought that this was a position going into spring training. I had a former manager of mine in the minor leagues for 2 years. He and I were extremely close. When coming to spring training, I could tell after the first week that he was acting different. And for some reason or another, I felt like he didn't want it to seem like I had an advantage over anyone else on the ball field. And I said, you know what, I've played 10 years, Mock. I said, I don't need to feel like I have an advantage over anybody. I said, if you value a relationship, it shouldn't matter. Mm-hmm. And I said, you're the reason why I signed here, because the only other place was the Yankees in the minor leagues. But I thought I could really help the organization if I had to go to minor leagues a little bit, but I knew I could help this organization as a pinch hitter off the bench, a veteran guy. Who's basically. Well, long story short, it was kind of a difficult spring. I could see the writing on the wall pretty early. It was all about, to me, who's going to do the best in spring training. A couple other guys had better numbers than I did. And on my way out, I just told him, I said, look, I've played in several postseason games. I won a world championship, played 10 years in big leagues. I was like, and the biggest thing was none of my stats in spring training are going to count in the regular season. And I sat there and told the general manager, and Maka was there and all this stuff, and Ken Maga. I said, you throw all that stuff out the window. I said, when game day comes around, you'll see what I'm all about. I said, and if somebody gets hurt, you're gonna value the fact that you might have a young guy too, but you're gonna value the fact you got a veteran who's been through just about as difficult of situations that you can have on a field than anybody else in this organization. None of these guys, I mean, you can say they played in difficult series, the Brewers have, but nothing like 19 times out of a year playing against Red Sox, Yankees, where it's magnified to the nth degree.
Right. And come through in a World Series.
And do all that stuff. And so, I've been through it. And so that was a frustrating time. My family wasn't with me. I could see the writing on the wall. I think the biggest thing that disappointed me was, believe it or not, was how the communication and the relationship that I had with a manager that I had in the minor leagues together. He and I went through so much in 2 years, 4 years in the minor leagues together between Trenton and Pawtucket. Be someone who pretty much didn't want to have conversation with me or whatever. And I think it was because maybe he saw the writing on the wall. He knew that the front office didn't want me to be a part of the organization. Maybe he didn't want to get too close, whatever. But, that was it. I got released and I said my piece. Probably not as much as I wanted to because, and when in saying my piece, it wasn't bad. It was all just like, look, the numbers are going to be zero when you start. And, it made things kind of a little bit sour in leaving the game of baseball. I knew there wasn't a lot of other options out there. The guys that they kept went a total of 2 for 50 in the first month and a half. They were sent out. One was released. One was sent to the minor league. So I'm like, it wasn't a ha-ha moment, but it was just like, there's no vindication in that. And the game of baseball was a little bit different, it seemed like guys that were in the position that I was as an outfielder, middle-aged guy, were kind of being, not pushed out, but they're kind of being worked out of the system and going with younger guys. So
what was it like adjusting to life then without baseball on a daily basis?
I think the biggest thing was that what made it easier for me was, was my wife. I was able to be with my wife and 2 boys, and my oldest boy was playing baseball and playing football. My youngest one was a little too young at the time, but and he was doing the same thing. So those kind of things, kept me going, being able to coach, having some opportunities to make some appearances. I got to go to Iraq and spend some time with military guys that were stationed over in Iraq. That was pretty special 2 weeks. I was, a little apprehensive in going over there. Jeff Nelson, who was a New York Yankee that I hated at the time, I was like, he's going with us? And they're like, the guys were like, yeah, we're going to have a great time. And believe it or not, 3 days into it, I loved being around this guy. I was like, you know what, Jeff? I said, honestly, I hated your guts when we played. He goes, I hated you too. And I was like, well, it's been a pleasure being out there. And, those guys, I didn't hit golf balls well. They were hitting golf balls on Saddam's, whatever you want to call it, his palace.
Really?
From his hunting lodge. And I'm like, what are we doing right now?
Yeah, really.
But it was great to spend time with the men and women that served our country. So I had a lot of things keeping me busy. And I think that was the biggest thing. And for a lot of professional athletes, if they don't have that, maybe they don't have that at significant other or kids and so forth, it's really difficult, And I felt like I did a really good job of managing my money. I have some financial advisors that I remember I prayed one year in the offseason. I prayed and prayed and prayed for, to have the right person to help me with our finances. And lo and behold, 2 months later, there he is. And was in a good position, and I think there was a lot of opportunities to get back into the game, to get into television. Sometimes I regret it, but for a majority of the reason why I did it, I don't regret it, and that was to be with my family.
Sure.
And
well, tell me about the boys now. I mean, they're both at an age where they're getting involved in sports, and they're growing up, and you hear a lot now about parents and should they be allowed to play football, and you got guys like Aaron Judge who are 6'6", 6'7", playing baseball now and not playing football. Talk to me as a pro athlete who played collegiately on the football level and pro baseball. What do you think about all that? Are you afraid of the boys playing football? Would you rather they play baseball?
No, I want them to play what I want them to do things that they're passionate about. My boys have been passionate about sports. Chase, my oldest one, he's at New Hanover. He'll be a sophomore this year, and he's passionate. He loves Tom Brady. And I was like, well, you're not going to be able to wear 12. That was Mr. Barrett's number, and that number's retired.
Yeah.
And but he's passionate about football. He loves baseball as well, so he plays baseball in the spring. My youngest one, he's kind of still the three-sport kind of goer. He's still at that age where he can play as many sports as possible. So he plays Pop Warner football and plays had played rec ball out at Supper Optimist, travel ball. Played school for the first time at the Myrtle Grove Christian where he goes, and then also tries to play basketball to fit that in. The difficult part about sports nowadays is that they have them year-round, except for football pretty much. And that makes it difficult for some kids. I think some kids feel like they're going to lose the reps that they need or what they need to stay on that a certain travel team baseball-wise. And I always love hearing these, people that I really respect, former professional athletes, collegiate coaches at the highest level, telling kids, play as many different sports as you can. So talk about being an athlete. You got to be an athlete. Yeah, I mean, you could be an athlete and just say, look, I'm just going to play basketball year-round. But, I mean, go from basketball to baseball or, football to baseball to soccer, whatever you can. Play as many sports as you can because every sport's got its own unique, movements that are going to help you become the best athlete you can. And
football made you a better baseball player, didn't it? I mean,
I think it does to a certain degree. And I felt like for me it was a mentality thing, and I was very competitive in football, and I was somebody when football first started, I wasn't so keen on contact, but then by the time I was a senior, I loved contact, and maybe to a certain detriment that I would try to go find contact sometimes, where, Sasser and Coach Miller would get on me about that kind of stuff. And, so yeah, I think it paid its dividends in baseball for me, but for my boys, I've always told them, I was like, look, I don't need you to go out and do something you're not passionate about. I don't want you to play baseball because I play baseball. That's just not fair, and it's not something I want you to do. If you wanted to play golf instead of baseball, hey, let's go. Yeah. I'm terrible at golf, but I'm sure I can find some people who are pretty good at it and can teach you the game.
Yeah.
And but that's the biggest thing. Whatever your passions are, let's go after those things. And and I'm proud of them. They keep me busy year round. It's probably it is the biggest reason why I don't try to move back into baseball.
Mm-hmm. Maybe someday when they grow up a little bit.
Maybe someday, but by that time they may have kids, and I may want to help the grandkids.
Yeah.
And so,
tell me about Walt Day and what he means to you.
Walt means a great deal to my family, especially to Catherine and I. He was our chaplain with the Red Sox. Walt is somebody who's selfless, and he's all about everyone else, and he loves Christ, his personal relationship, and being able to gift that same type of relationship he has with Christ. He loves to gift it to other families, other kids. It could be inner city kids. It could be kids from, a foreign country, that doesn't have the means that we have, players' wives. He was also the chaplain for a time for the New England Patriots. He's helped out at times with the Boston Red Sox. The Boston Celtics.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very instrumental in my wife and our lives in helping us grow into Christianity, spending time with us, walking us through the Bible, kind of answering a lot of questions. Because sometimes, the Bible can be kind of overwhelming. You got a lot of questions, and sometimes you may, and I've fallen into this thing, you're like, I don't want to sound stupid, so I'm not going to ask the question. But it was great having Walt around, not only for Catherine and I, but also for the organization. He's a tremendous asset through Baseball Chapel Ministries and Major League Baseball, and he was a tremendous asset with the Patriots. And I was like, man, Walt. And when we won our World Series title in 2004, he got a ring for it because, he's been not just instrumental in 2004, but years leading up to that. And I was like, man, Walt, you should have a whole wall of titles with the Patriots and then us. But just joking around. And I don't get to talk to him that much. Every now and then we'll talk a couple times. Sometimes he'll make a trip. He'll come down and stay with us. And he's great with Chase and Luke because he's watched both of them grow up,
But a guy who people might be surprised to know how much he means to Trot Nixon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And he's not someone that goes around and tell him. Yeah. He's got tremendous contacts and relationships with a lot of guys, a lot of former professional athletes. And still to this day, I get emails. They get the emails sent out. He's working with professional soccer players up in the New England area, doing stuff throughout the community year in and year out, helping. He's got 3 little boys that have had a tough life. And he's calling me, hey, what kind of bat do I need to get him? I said, look, let me buy the bat. If you want me to order a bat, I'll order it and send it up to you. And just for these kids to play rec ball. I actually got a little bit of time when we go up there to spend. I had an appearance, and I told the guys for the appearance, I said, you know what? I don't need a hotel. I'm going to stay with Walt. And I got to meet the kids. They came over and get Christmas cards of him and the kids. So, he's just a tremendous person. And Walt's a very special person, not only in my life.
People should look him up because
Athletes in Action.
Yeah.
We always give every year to Athletes in Action, and it's because of Walt Day. Even though we didn't have hardly anything to do with Athletes in Action, it's always the Baseball Chapel and our personal relationship with Walt. Yeah. But he's got tremendous treasures waiting for him in heaven.
I've taken up a lot of your time. I want to go quickly here. Best manager you ever played for?
I don't have a best manager because I love them all. Jimmy Williams obviously probably did the most.
Mm-hmm.
Grady Little, Tito, Eric Wedge. Tito is Terry Francona, obviously. Yeah. Eric Wedge in Cleveland. Eric Wedge and I felt like we were kind of the same, had the same kind of attitude. And I remember going to him and say, look, I'm not playing that much. And I know in previous years you've had to deal a lot with stuff in the clubhouse and managing the team. He goes, I'm going to make your life easier. I said, this group of guys, we had a couple of veterans, David DeLucci, and I said, we're going to handle the clubhouse. You go do your job. And I think that was the first time he could actually kind of relax as a manager and enjoy the whole process of being a manager.
Toughest pitcher you ever faced?
Probably Mariano Rivera. There have been several nights where we have faced a pitcher that I was like, oh my God, that guy's unhittable. Tim Hudson one night, he threw a one-hitter, and the one hit I got off of him was off the end of the bat. It was a little spinner, and it was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be fair. So I take off and run. That was it. And everything else was just a blur because his stuff was so good. But Mariano, being someone who has one pitch and you know it's coming and you still can't hit it, that's got to put him tops on a lot of lists. Roger Clemens, he's shown some of the dirtiest split fingers I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, well, I got to get on the fastball before I get that split because the split's night time. But the best pitcher I've ever played, been on the field with has been Pedro. There's some times where earlier on in his career in Boston, he was punching 12 to 17 out every outing. People don't realize. You just don't. You see. We see Sale striking out double digits a lot right now. And when I tell people, I was like, well, Petey was punching out 12 to 17, going into the Yankee Stadium and striking out against one of the best baseball teams in the history of the game, the New York Yankees, striking out 17. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And
really good.
So
consistently.
There's some great pitchers, don't get me wrong, and the game has changed quite a bit because, to me, nowadays, everybody throws 95 to 100 miles an hour. That didn't happen back, and I think you saw a lot more precision with movement, change-ups, off-speed stuff. Some guys could throw smoke, but the game is changing a lot different. I won't get into all that, but those are.
You're a reflective guy. Mm-hmm. You're a guy who kind of looks back, and I've never, in all the times that I've known you, I've never known Trot Nixon to have a regret. Mm-hmm. You're a reflective guy. You look back at what you did, and you never walked off the field saying you never gave it your 100% best.
I think the one regret that I have is I didn't take better care of my body. That's the one regret I have. Now, I can't do anything about my back, but I feel like I could have probably taken a lot better care of my body, and you hear stories now, professional athletes spending $500,000, $250,000 on their body, and some people are like, wow, that's a lot of money. I can't believe he puts it. I'm like, well, he's doing it because the only way he makes that kind of money is making sure his body's right. Now, that's a lot of football guys doing that, but it's just like an investment. If you got a car, runs on premium gasoline, are you going to pump it full of diesel? No, you're not. Or you're going to put kerosene in it? No, you're not. So it's the same way for an athlete. Being in what you, how you eat, how you train, sleep. I never went to sleep. I don't think half the guys ever went to sleep. But it's taking care of your body so, you can go out there and perform and hopefully – get those opportunities to stay in the game longer. I think it was the thing for me was to be able to be in the game longer. I think if I took better care of my body and didn't just play with a relentless – it's kind of hard to take care of your body and play a relentless attitude out there. But I think, in the off season, during the season especially, taking care of my body, getting the rest that I needed.
You're proud to be a dirt dog?
Yeah, I am. And at first I thought that was kind of a jab. I was like, the guy, you're kind of a dirt dog. I was like, what is he talking about, a dirt dog? What's a dirt dog? I just figured it was a filthy dog or whatever. And then the media had to, back away. The Boston media, no, let me explain what he's talking about. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I said, well, that was great. It's a great compliment. But I didn't think much of it. And then it just kind of yeah, I didn't hear much about it, but I guess it kind of took its had its own path and so forth. But it's pretty cool because a lot of people will ask me to put OG on it, the original Dirt Dog. And, I think that's kind of funny too at times, putting the OG Dirt Dog on there. But
Life is fun? Life is good?
Life is great. I'm blessed. I got 2 healthy boys. Got a great family. My wife, she means everything to me. She makes us go, even though she's got to deal with 3 boys in the house. And got a dog, Black Lab, Fenway. He's the happiest person on the planet, and it's fantastic. And yeah, I got no complaints. I love being on the field. You'll see me on a field tonight at 6 o'clock. I spent just about every day on a baseball field this summer, getting ready to spend some time on the field, doing what I love to do, is being involved in athletics here in Wilmington, and watching my boys play. That's where I get my most pleasure. They probably don't realize it, but the most pleasure I have in my life is sitting back and watching my boys play football or baseball or basketball. That's the most fun for me.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy, coach and dad and husband. Appreciate the time. Thanks,
No
man.
problem. Thank you for having me.
As a member of the media, it was fun covering Trot Nixon's career at New Hanover High School during that brief stop at NC State and then on to playing professional baseball. Young athletes of today would benefit from talking to and hearing from Trot Nixon. Hearing him talk about all the time he put in, honing his skills, and never once giving up on his dream to be a champion. If you know someone who you think would be a good interview for an upcoming episode of the podcast, send me an email, jevans@wect.com. And if you like what you heard on this podcast episode, please do me a favor, leave a review or a rating. That'll help us bring in even more listeners in the future. I'm John Evans. Thanks for joining us for this episode of One on One.